Welcome to another episode of the CPG Guys podcast. Our co-hosts, Sri Rajagopalan and Peter V.S. Bond, explore how brands and retailers engage with consumers online, in-store, and everywhere in between. And now, here are Sri and Peter.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of the CPG Guys podcast. I'm, of course, Sri, the West Coast CPG guy, and yet a New York Yankees fan. And joining me, of course, from the East Coast is the East Coast CPG guy, Mr. Peter, aka the Golden Voice himself, sometimes lovingly known as Mr. 007, a Dodgers fan. I mean, that is such a strange anomaly that I live here in Los Angeles territory, and I can't give up the Yankees the rest of my life at 23-8. The number one, baby, of baseball today. And then you're a Dodgers fan sitting up in Connecticut. I would have thought Red Sox, but hey, it is what it is. Folks, May was Asian Pacific Heritage Month in the U.S., which celebrates the Asian heritage and its contributions to American society. I personally formed and led the PepsiCo Asian Network, and this is personal to me in my career journey. I encourage all of you to take time to seek, learn, embrace what this means in your own journey of allyship. Our baseball teams, as I've declared, are crushing it. Now, let me welcome the man himself, the VP of Partner Strategy at Fetch Rewards, Mr. Bond. Peter, how you doing, man?
Hey, Sri, I'm doing real well. I'm also enjoying how well our baseball teams are doing, though it's kind of sucks when we're both in first place. We can't really, make fun of the trials and tribulations of the other. I mean, all we're doing is just counting the days till the fall classic. But hey, I guess that's a high-grade problem in the grand scheme of things. And I don't even miss you. You know what? That's the really fun part, Sri. I was with you in Philadelphia this week. I'm going down to Florida with you in a couple of days. I mean, absence makes the heart grow fonder, but you haven't even been absent in my life enough lately, Sri. So it's good to see you, old friend.
Thank you, sir. And two fine, handsome gentlemen will be at both the Home Run Derby and the All-Star Game this year. I wonder who they are. Thank you, Peter. Let me remind all audience that our content may be found by visiting cpgguys.com on a browser. If you aren't already following us on LinkedIn, all you have to do is go to the search box, type CPG Guys, and when you get to our page, simply click the blue plus button, which is follow. That way you'll get to see all of the content we produce. And the best thing about it, there is no subscription fee. Peter, is there a subscription fee? For those watching the video, he's got a giant goose egg on his hands. Not a real goose egg, just kidding. It's always been about the education and sharing journey and introducing brands and retailers to service providers and checking out what's going on in the amazing world of CPG with all the uncertainty we deal today. Remember to check out our sister podcast, the FMCG Guys, hosted by our friends Daniel and Efrain. They take our format across the pond and speak to retail and FMCG luminaries from a European perspective out in Western Europe. Just visit fmcgguys.com. We're proud to partner with Next Stop, aka what used to be known as the Network of Executive Women, whose mission it is to advance all women in business and to promote the cause of gender equality and career development. Visit nextstopisnow.org to learn more about this great group, and in the middle of Wednesday episodes, you can find a hidden Easter egg with the upcoming seminars and events. And now, drumroll please, Peter. Today's episode features a data analytics and infrastructure provider with a mission statement that says, unlock the true potential of data, connect to data where it lives, even across a disparate universe, all at unparalleled scale. Yes, indeed, we're pleased to partner with Habu on this episode to decompose finding, activating, understanding, and measuring your success on the brand equity and growth journey. We have none other than Mr. Mac Kilmartin, the co-founder and CEO of Habu. Join Peter and me in welcoming him to the podcast. Matt, welcome. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you guys doing today?
At 1-2 in baseball's Hall of Fame, 23-8, and I believe 21-10. I don't think we are complaining, man. But we got to ask, what's your allegiance to in terms of sports?
So I'm a Red Sox fan, so I sort of round things out for you guys, but I'm not paying a lot of attention to them right now because of the Celtics, who are having a great playoff run and hopefully can even things up in Milwaukee tonight and get back on track after beating up on the Brooklyn Nets.
Good luck to the Celtics indeed, because the Clippers were eliminated a while ago. That's the only Los Angeles team that I actually follow. But before we get to the questions, Peter, and I've prepared for our conversation, Matt, let me ask you if you can share with your audience where on the web they can learn more about Habu and give us a brief introduction to what Habu does.
Sure. So you can find us on all the major social channels. For the most sort of in-depth content, you can find us on habu.com. The good news is fortunate to be speaking with you guys today, and there's a lot of great press being written right now around our category. So every day I feel like people are talking about data collaboration, data clean rooms. So there's a lot of material out there right now. But to get to the source and aggregate all the information about us, feel free to check out our website, habu.com. And just to give you the high level one-on-one on exactly what we do, we are in the data collaboration category. What that actually means is two parties who have data sets, who have a common interest in getting access to each other's data, but don't necessarily want to give each other their data. That's what Habu software provides. So it facilitates data-driven outcomes using our software for data collaboration, which is becoming, the term today is becoming data clean rooms. But at the highest level, that's what we help brands and their partners do.
I don't know about you, Peter, but that's the simplest explanation of a clean room I've heard, because we've had other people come here and talk to us about clean rooms and often have left those conversations thinking there's a possibility I might have to buy Clorox, but you make it sound easy. We're going to decompose it later. Of course, you said, hey, two parties that don't necessarily want to bring their data for the benefit of the consumer and brand equity or retail growth, you can actually do that via clean room. But we're going to decompose what that means during this episode and get to the bitter details. For our audience, though, we'll include links, of course, to your LinkedIn profile, Habu corporate site, in the digital liner notes of this podcast episode. So without further ado, let's play ball. And so, Matt, I thought we'll start first with your own career journey and how this company was formed, etc. But you've had quite a bit of experience, like almost the boss, or as they'd say back up in Boston for you, the boss of data and analytics infrastructure and CRM too in the process when you spend time at Salesforce and other tech providers in your career. So can you take us through your career journey from your earlier days at Akamai Electronics to Habu and then to Habu, and what prompted you to start up Habu and why? You could have done many things. Why data, analytics, and infrastructure? Did you see something early in this journey in the industry?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. And I think it's, the way I ended up at Habu is very similar to sort of the why I left Akamai as well. So back in, call it, now maybe 15 years ago or so, I was working in technology at Akamai, and I was working in the office of the CTO on new business ventures. And we started doing things around data. And that's where I discovered the world of advertising. I didn't really know anything about it. And there was this whole trend around how data could personalize experiences and inform advertising to give consumers a better experience and to help brands with their relevancy. And at that time at Akamai, this was before programmatic, this was before DSPs, this was before RTBs, this was before any of this stuff. I saw a need where there's this sort of separation of data and media, right? So instead of people sort of buying content as proxies to audience, people could start to get a data asset, if you will, to start to inform personalized experiences, right? And so I left Akamai and actually started with a company called Crux, which was a data management platform. DMP is the acronym, and Crux had worked with a ton of CPGs companies like Kellogg and L'Oreal and others. But basically, it was all about using data to drive better ROI for their marketing spend to drive personalized advertising. So that's how I ended up at Salesforce, was because Salesforce acquired Crux in 2016. And, Salesforce is really the leaders in CRM and one-to-one engagement around sort of known customers. So when it comes to marketing, it's a lot of email and one-to-one interaction. But they really had a void around sort of pseudonymous data and really thinking about broader audiences. And that's where Crux became a product inside the Salesforce Marketing Cloud. So I'll step on the gas here, but basically my role at Salesforce evolved to be Chief Customer Officer for consumer data. So across marketing and service and sales, there's the consumer, which all the brands sort of care about. And I saw really an opportunity where brands had the same goals around omnichannel personalization, personalized advertising, maximizing ROI of their spend. But I could see the drums beating in terms of just change and rapid change and sort of foundational change, which was happening fast. And really just came to the realization that innovation was going to be needed, and sometimes when there's massive change, having a clean slate to build something brand new is a competitive advantage. And so that's why I left Salesforce to start Habu, was because I really felt that, and I'll talk about sort of the tectonic changes, but I felt a new breed of data and analytics software was going to be needed to help brands continue to achieve these data-driven outcomes they wanted, in light of some of these massive changes happening in our industry. So that's a little bit about sort of the departure from Akamai to Crux and departure from Salesforce to Habu is very much the same reasons, just really seeing an opportunity for innovation. And, fast forward to today, we've got a lot of really big, large clients. There's competitors, there's a market. And so I think we're onto something. Although it is early days, we're definitely starting to see a lot of great use cases with our technology.
Matt, welcome to the CPG Guys podcast. I love doing this if for no other reason than to listen to my co-host attempt a Boston accent. It just makes me want to chuckle. I love it. But hey, we'll let him dream. You're going to play Donnie Wahlberg in the movie version of New Kids, Shri. I think you got this one. You got the talent, the singing talent, the family. I think you can pull this off. Anyhow, so Matt, thank you for giving us that overview of your background. You started down the journey of giving us the description of where the opportunity was to create Habu. Really, what was the catalyst for saying you can make a real business out of this? What was the missing piece in the industry that you said, okay, we can probably deliver the best-in-class solution? And how has that been evolving since your founding?
Yeah, great question. When we started, we launched into a problem space, meaning a problem space of these sort of changes that I talked about. Let me sort of just specifically talk about what those changes are and then sort of how we came to be, right? So the three changes were, if you think about digital advertising spend, 70% is going to these major, oftentimes people refer to, Google, Facebook, Amazon as walled gardens, right? And these companies used to sort of share exposure level data. They used to share data back with brands for privacy reasons, for potentially business reasons as well. They stopped doing that, right? And so these companies, which control so much of the consumer data on the internet, were changing the game in terms of how brands would access data, right? So that was one piece. And so if you think about a CPG company, for example, they obviously have been forever blind to transactions at retailers, right? Something they've sort of struggled with, hence the whole D2C trend and everyone investing in first-party data. But now if they're kind of blind to their upper funnel advertising, right, where they spend a lot of money, so that's one trend, just walled gardens constraining access to data. The second major trend was, and this is highly publicized now, it wasn't really highly publicized in 2019 when we got going, was the death of the cookie, right? And the browsers, right? Even though it's brittle technology, the cookie was the infrastructure for measurement. It was the infrastructure for targeting for a lot of these data-driven initiatives, and it's going away, right? And so people still have need to measure advertising. People still have needs to deliver personalized experiences. And then the third major trend was privacy, right? Like the ways in which data used to flow in this ecosystem was it was a little opaque, right? I mean, you guys have been at this for a while. People would send data all around, and now there's legislation and real laws in place around how companies need to treat some of this advertising consumer data. So these were the big three changes. And, my last sort of stint at Salesforce, I was meeting with hundreds of CMOs and chief data officers, and net, like their needs haven't changed. They still need to drive ROI, still need to drive data-driven outcomes, but they weren't going to be able to do it in light of these changes. So that was really the aha moment. And I can sort of talk a little bit about where we started, who kind of some customers came to be, where we evolved, but that's really the founding story of like the three problems and what was sort of the aha moment for us.
Matt, do you remember who your first customer was?
ASICS.
How about that, ASICS?
Yep. Not a CPG per se, but very similar, right? Footwear manufacturer.
Yeah, we know who ASICS is.
Yeah.
So I'm sure I bought stuff from ASICS many, many times. So sometimes not even knowing, perhaps. So let's now go into that very statement that you made, right? So you saw three problems. You saw the walled gardens of several of the social media vehicles who weren't sharing data, and then you saw the death of the cookie. So did all of us. And these sort of things have created headaches in terms of getting ROI and ROAS metrics and proper attribution for CMOs' dollar spends for ad budgets. That's why you created Habu at the right time, certainly at the right time. But the mission statement says, unlock the true potential of data, connect to data where it lives, even across a disparate universe, all at unparalleled scale. To do this, when we talked earlier, that's why you need a clean room. So give us the scoop on what a clean room means or what this means to brands, why you feel Habu is a leader in this space. And we are going to come back and decompose all your other offerings later, but let's stick to the mission here, which is why is Habu a leader and best qualified to do this, unlocking the potential of data?
Yeah, so I think the byproduct of those three changes is we live in a world now of decentralized data. So in the olden days, everyone could get that consumer ID, sort of build a whole customer 360 view and get all of this data to one place. If you can't do that from a technology perspective and you can't even get access to the data, the paradigm's changed, right? And so in terms of unlocking access to data, the paradigm changed for our software as well, where we don't actually pull data into a Habu system per se. We deploy our technology into different data environments, right? And so where we started was actually, let me just, before I go deeper on sort of where we started. So like the walled gardens, they've all launched data clean rooms, right? Google has something called Google Ads Data Hub. Amazon has something called the Amazon Marketing Cloud. Facebook, something called Facebook Advanced Analytics. And so that's actually where we started. And, where we started was building intelligence, building an analytics layer on top of those walled garden clean rooms, right? And so we really got pretty smart around democratizing access to this data and providing analytics for this data as well. And for those of you who aren't familiar with these environments, they're really just query environments for data scientists, right? And so Google's lives on top of BigQuery, Amazon's lives on top of Redshift and AWS. And so these are all sort of disparate environments. So one of the founding principles of our technology was like, no one's going to give us this data. So let's deploy analytics where data lives, right? And so like what ended up happening was, we got an RFP from Hulu actually, and they didn't work with us in the beginning, but a year later they are a client, so Disney Select, and they basically wanted to build their own version of Google Ads Data Hub, right? And now you have retailers who have all this great transaction data. Well, they don't want to ship it over to, a CPG. And so they've sort of built their own data clean rooms as well. And so that same principle of access data where it lives, all these companies, right, are investing in their own cloud data infrastructure. And so you asked Sri about like, why are we in a unique position? Well, two of our founding principles was one is we have to be interoperable from a cloud perspective and interoperable from an identity perspective. And so if one CPG has their data in Azure, and let's say Disney has their data in Snowflake, how do you work across those two environments without actually combining the data? Because people aren't going to do that, right? And so this flexibility, and I'm going to talk about some use cases as well with some CPG clients, but really this flexibility of our software is one of the reasons why we've had a lot of success where clean rooms can support a lot of different use cases.
So Matt, for the benefit of our audience, I wanted to clarify something. So if two different set of brands, two different organizations, call them what you may, are on completely different data infrastructure platforms, by coming together in a clean room, you can overcome the challenge of not having to worry about the fact that one could be Oracle and one could be Azure or something completely different. The clean room would actually take care of that.
100%, yes.
It's good to hear.
All right. That's actually really great, Matt. And your mention about how you use your own techniques in external data environments. Let's double click down on that a bit and talk specifically about data models and data enrichment. So would love to hear about what Habu's capabilities are in this area, and where do you typically take brands in applying these use of data models to improve what data assets they have, and why do you think that sets you apart from your competition?
Yep. So fortunately, and I've mentioned a couple of our customer names, we are fortunate to work with what I would call really innovative brands that are really first movers in their categories. And so when you're working with such sort of category leaders, there's a lot of sort of co-innovation that's happening, right? And so that specific example that you're talking about and alluding to, and I'm hopeful our client that I'm talking about will join us on the follow-up episode here, is they've built really sophisticated models around propensity to buy different products, and they have a very large portfolio of different products. Now, like a lot of CPGs, they don't have a lot of first party data to run these models against, right? So what they are actually using our software to do is to run their models on retailer transaction data to be able to score a retailer transaction data set to understand likelihood to buy, propensity to buy, merchandising strategies, pricing strategies. And so this was a use case that they actually came up with. We didn't even come up with it at design time. They said, hey, this data clean room thing's interesting where you can access two data sets. What about a machine learning model, right? Could we actually leverage your software to run our model on someone else's data set? And the value of it is said CPG company does not see the retailer data, and the retailer doesn't actually see the CPG company's model. So it's a really interesting use cases where you're actually thinking about, or software becomes almost like general purpose machine learning software if you're able to enrich a model with better quality data, right? And so, it's interesting, like when we started the company, and I talked about like the problems and the challenges, in some ways it's like, I actually think it's like an incredible opportunity, right? Because you have this really flexible technology, which gives you more transparent access to higher fidelity data. It gives the privacy controls for the data owners, right? And so that's a great example, I'd say, of like growth, where this particular customer is really fueling these models with a much better signal, much better data signal.
The statement you made out there, I'm going to write that one down, which is flexible tech that actually gives higher fidelity data, because in a 25-year CPG career that has spanned some of the largest brands that exist in the world, having flexible tech that gets you to the privacy aspect, aka a reference to higher fidelity data, I've not come across too many. So congratulations for being able to say that publicly. A reminder to our audience that we're speaking to Matt Kilmartin, co-founder and CEO of Habu, a leading data infrastructure provider. So I love, Peter, that we're actually going into the depths of data over here and actually talking about the infrastructure of data, not just data and outcomes and things of that nature. Now let's get into what I would call the second piece of this, which is if the infrastructure can be made well with a clean room, which is your primary business, and I'll assume a good solid data model can be built and optimized by the right analytic providers, segmentation would be the next focus. So what is the role of first-party data in this, and what is Habu's role in all of this?
Yeah. So I think a key for any brand, whether you're a CPG, whatever brand, like first-party data is gold, right? Literally, if a consumer is going to sort of declare their identity to you, having that one-to-one first-party relationship is critical, right? If you think about a lot of CPGs, though, from a scale perspective, there's just never enough. And even for the data you have, you don't have a lot of columns of data signal around your audiences, right? And so where Habu's role really comes in around segmentation, first-party data is really around audience and enrichment, right? And so Disney, actually, which is Hulu and ESPN, Disney Select is effectively their clean room offering. And the upfronts are coming up next week. A lot of the big CTV providers have announced data clean rooms. NBC Universal has one, Roku has one. By the way, a lot of retailers have them now as well. And basically what a CPG can do is take whatever data signal they have, right? And it doesn't have to be a first-party data signal. It can even be like when they're running media, right? And they can overlay that first-party data signal or any sort of media analytics data with all the segments that a retailer might have or all the segments that a connected TV provider might have. So if you think about segmentation, like now all of a sudden you can build, again, it's transparent access, right? If who's going to load up all the TV shows, if everyone who sort of saw your ads and all the specifics there and all the affinity segments they have, I mean, that helps advertising, helps analytics, helps consumer profile segmentation, right? There's a lot of really interesting applications there. So that's an example of where we help with segmentation. And there's activation as well, like even within those environments, like you can build segments to do activation as well to drive more of a personalized advertising experience. And I can give an example a little bit later about like pre-planning insights and campaign optimization. But that's definitely been an area where we help with segmentation, is enriching any first-party signal you might have.
So Matt, I'd love for you to actually give the example.
Absolutely. So one of the big things right now that CTV providers are doing is really to help with pre-campaign planning, right? So before you actually spend, a dollar of advertising, it's really around understanding where your audiences are, understanding other attributes around those audiences, right? And so that's actually a big use case, which a lot of the CPGs are doing right now because they're spending a lot of those environments, is actually understanding where the people are actually at, understanding different attributes to understand the creative strategy, messaging strategy, et cetera, et cetera. So that is one of like the big use cases that people are doing out of the gate right now. And I think, there's definitely a lot of more use cases around targeting and around measurement as well that clean rooms are powering. But I'd say this is the one right now, which we're starting to see at scale. Now, the interesting thing, Shri, is, and I don't know if this was one of your questions, but this is definitely something that's coming. A question we're starting to get from CPGs is like, I find this space really confusing, right? Like, wait a minute. So I got Google, I got Amazon, I got Facebook. What about Snapchat? What about TikTok? What about Twitter? Oh, what about these 4 retailers? Oh, what about these 6 connected TV providers? Are you telling me I need to have 18 different analytics environments, right? And so where we think this all goes is there needs to be an interoperability layer. And that's ultimately a role in which we see Habu playing here. But right now, where we are from an adoption and just a maturity of the technology, it's getting really good in sort of these single channels. We are starting to do some dual channel things as well, but it's really around, getting access to more data right now to help with some of the different data-driven advertising use cases.
There's no debate in my head, Matt. If you're a brand today, if you go back in history, we always complained as brands we want access to data. Now that we have a plethora of data sets, we're not so sure how to bring it together. Now I know the secret code clean rooms can help.
So Matt, earlier in the conversation, you gave us a really good explanation of what a clean room is. Why don't you expand upon that? Because, I spent 3 years working at CVS Health in doing category and brand personalization, and I worked with a whole team of data scientists, and all they did all day was just try and build propensity signals that I could leverage to make relevant offers at the relevant time in the relevant manner to try and drive measurable conversion. So why don't you talk to us about really how clean rooms can enable your clients to take not only the data assets they own, but other data assets to ultimately deliver meaningful outcomes.
Yeah, that's great. And CVS is a great company doing a lot of great work in the space. Actually, I launched with their CMO last week. But it seems like the clean room category, right? There's really 2 types of clean rooms. There's the walled garden clean rooms, right? So I've talked about Facebook and Amazon and Google and what folks are doing there. And in those worlds, I'd say brands are a little bit more, I hate to say the word sort of rule takers, but these companies are sort of setting the rules in terms of what granularity of privacy are you able to access data, how much noise are they injecting into queries to maintain privacy. And so in that world, you're sort of working within the walled garden clean room, right? The other world I'd say is, and this is a trend we're starting to see, and we actually are working with some sort of leading CPG clients right now in the beauty category and also in the beverage and snacks category, where brands are actually saying, hey, this is such a critical capability, rather than me being like, I understand that like I have to do what Google and Amazon are actually going to do. But for these other environments, like how can I actually sort of control how I want to collaborate with them? And so we're seeing brands actually license our technology directly as, hey, we've got neutral data infrastructure. Hey, we do a huge sponsorship with you in a sports league. We understand you're not going to give us all your data, but we've got a way we can access to the data in a privacy safe way where you don't have to give us the data, right? And truly trying to influence how their partners work with them, right? And we are seeing, like on the retailer side and the media side and on the sports league side and on the financial service side, like there's optionality that these providers will give to the brands as well. But I think that I think we're super fortunate to work with some of the smartest data-driven brands out there right now. And I think they are, if you think about sort of the adoption of technology, these guys are the innovators, early adopters. We're really leaning into the category, and I think are really developing a competitive advantage themselves because they're really getting facile and good at working with different data sets and working this new environment. So I'd say that's just a little bit of like definition of the clean room category. And I think the people who don't lean into it are the ones who are to wake up and saying, oh my gosh, I have to work across 20 different environments. How am I going to do this, right? And then they're going to need to wait for an intelligence layer like Habu, which is coming along, but it is early days in this market still.
So, Matt, I want to jump to the retail side of the fence where the actual shopping happens for most consumers. So, how does Habu help a retailer with that data and insights journey that we've just been talking about? And what examples do you have of successful partnerships with who?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we are fortunate to have one of the largest sort of US retailers as a customer, and we are actually powering all of their collaboration efforts. So everything they're doing with CPGs, we are powering. And they are a customer of Snowflake, who actually is an investor in Habu. So we've built a lot of our technology on top of Snowflake, and they invested in our last round. And this particular retailer has really sophisticated sort of marketing sciences division around exposing data to CPGs around spend, category spend, share of wallet, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's sort of one instance of collaboration with CPGs that we are powering for them. And the other piece is around their retail media network. And retail media is a very sort of hot category right now. And so we're powering the way in which CPGs and retailers will connect their data. We're also powering for them the way retailers will connect their data with CTV providers as well, right? Because, you talked about, Sri, like where people shop. Well, where people view is, on all these CTV platforms, right? And obviously the retailers aren't sending all their transaction data to those CTV platforms. So that is really, we're providing sort of that connectivity between these different parties where a CPG who is spending advertising dollars with the retailer can understand, how is this sort of transaction, right? The transaction signal, how's it actually impacting performance of the spend, right? And so sort of we're the central hub of the retailer's transaction data with CPG providers, whether CPGs sort of bring data, and with CTV providers as well as additional inventory sources to help. So retail and CPG has been a really sweet spot use case for us if you think about sort of the different needs to get access to data. And at the end of the day, what's great for technology is it helps both parties, and it's actually better for the consumer too, right? Because it's done in a privacy safe way. There's no sort of creepy tracking that's actually happening. Things are done sort of at a cohort level. So all these privacy enhancing technologies are in place to make sure that sort of we're on the right side of the line, right? And I think a lot of historical ways things were done around this don't make sense. So that's a specific example, Sri, of just how we're working with a retailer.
Hey, Matt, we had on Snowflake a couple months ago, and they talked about clean rooms. Now we see it coming full circle and have an understanding of why Habu fits very well into their investment portfolio. So I'll ask the last question of our conversation today, which is, would love from you advice you have for CPG leaders that comes from the work you've done and what you've learned in working with brands. How can they prepare for this uncertain future and the areas that you focused on in the beginning of our conversation? My first question to you, that we're currently experiencing. What do you urge them to do with respect to all these disparate data sets that they have available and how to prepare them to succeed in this environment?
So I touched on this a little bit, Peter, and I think people who are sort of, I don't want to be negative, but are sort of being ostriches and putting their head in the sand and sort of waiting for perfect clarity around this stuff, they're going to be waiting for a long time, right? There's a lot of questions which are unanswerable right now, right? And so I think that people who have true learning agendas, who have task forces around actually doing things and actually sort of leaning into all these new technologies are the ones that are going to have a significant competitive advantage than other people. And so my sort of piece of advice to people would be like, don't wait on the sidelines for perfect clarity. Like, take action, figure out a use case, do something, right? Because if people are sort of waiting for this perfect nirvana of how's all this stuff going to work together, like, it's going to take time, right? Like, I mean, if we think back to, when did programmatic advertising sort of first start, right? It was like 2008, something like that, right? And then here we are now in 2022, right? And like the Trade Desk is massive and Google's massive with everything they're doing in this category. So I think the people who sort of lean in early and do things are the people who are going to develop a competitive advantage. And the good news is we meet people where they are, right? We're very sort of use case driven and crawl, walk, run, shared success model. And if I sparked any interest or ideas of anyone listening today, I'd be happy to chat further. But I really have enjoyed the opportunity to chat with you guys.
So for our audience, let me remind you that you can find all our content at cpgguys.com on a browser. And of course, join our growing community. One of the best ways to do that is to go to linkedin.com, go to the search bar and simply type CPG Guys and hit the follow button, which is also a blue plus button. We'd love for you to give us a rating and a review. Why we ask you to do that? We are a growing family. We have close to 13K followers on LinkedIn. We can't thank you enough for the love you show us, the direct messages you sent us, and for the engagement and downloading and listening to every one of our episodes. The rating tells us whether we're getting it right. The review tells us what we need to fix. And you can do that easily by going to ratethispodcast.com/CPG Guys. And if you feel your company has thought leadership to contribute to our community discussion or learning, drop us an email at contact@cpgguys.com. Again, that's contact@cpgguys.com, and maybe you can join us on this podcast. Matt, I can't thank you enough for patiently decomposing what a clean room is and all the surrounding aspects of MarTech around how data once in a clean room can actually help build brand equity via striving for attribution, and of course all the bits and pieces of that, such as segmentation, etc. So thank you for that.
Thanks for having me.
Folks, of course, Habu's details as well as Matt's will be found in the digital liner of notes of this podcast. Peter, I want to say thank you, but first let me ask you to summarize what you learned today. My big one or two takeaways, one sentence summarizes it all for me. So I'm going to keep it real easy over here and then ask you to get to some details, Peter. And that is, somewhere in the middle, Matt said, this is about flexible tech that drives and gives higher fidelity data. Good enough for me. Peter, what do you think?
Couple things that drew my attention. What's driving the change in the industry, right? First of all, advertisers aren't sharing as much data. 2, the imminent death of the cookie. And 3, the increased concerns with privacy has everybody worried. Those walled gardens with all that valuable 1P data, well, before clean rooms, you couldn't access it. Now they have a viable method to be able to take all these powerful brand-built models and layer them on top of incredible retailer purchasing behavior data assets and create tremendous outcomes from that while respecting the privacy of the data sets and the privacy of the models, respective of who owns the two of them. So from my standpoint, couldn't be a better time for this kind of a solution. It seems like Habu is able to deliver to its brand and retail partners exactly what they need at the time they need it so that they can succeed in advertising to consumers.
Well said, man. In the days of cookies steadily and slowly becoming irrelevant from a data access standpoint and the walled gardens of privacy becoming even further, I would say, going from the Great Wall of China to now a wall that's probably 50 feet higher. One of the best ways that I've personally learned listening to Matt speak is the use of a clean room where two sets of data that may not even make sense from an infrastructure perspective, but have a common connection at the consumer level, perhaps for brand equity dev, can indeed come together. And what an important piece of the MarTech puzzle a clean room is. And, I love that we are actually taking on topics like this and making it easy for marketers. Of course, Habu's capabilities sounds like they're amazing, Matt. Thank you for joining us, folks. That is a wrap of this episode, and we will catch you soon on another episode of the CPG Guys.
The content in this podcast episode is provided for general informational purposes only. By listening to our episode, you understand that no information contained in this episode should be construed as advice from CPG Guys LLC or the individual author, hosts, or guests, nor is it intended to be a substitute for research on any subject matter. Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by CPG Guys LLC. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. The views expressed by CPG Guys LLC do not represent the views of their employers or the entity they represent. CPG Guys LLC expressly disclaims any and all liability or responsibility for any direct, indirect, incidental, special, consequential, or other damages arising out of any individual's use of, reference to, or inability to use this podcast or the information we present in this podcast.